This is the Jump Around with Jim Rutledge, outfitted by Iron Jock, streaming live on the ESPN Madison YouTube channel.
It is the Jump Around 3.0, as I affectionately call it, because I've been doing this show on and off forever, and we're thrilled to have it back as a digital show on ESPN Madison's YouTube. You can also listen back Wisconsin on Demand, Apple, Spotify, any of those great places. And since we last talked, the Wisconsin Badgers football team, which today's show is going to be mostly about the Wisconsin Badger football team. Maybe that would have changed if Wisconsin Badger basketball hadn't lost 3 in a row, and I worry they might lose 4 in a row. Butler's no slouch. So hopefully I'm wrong on the loss to Butler there, but not the greatest stretch here for Badger basketball, coming back down to earth after a top 25 start to the season. Ryan, I'm going to ask you this question, then we're going to move off college basketball because we have Ari Temkin of Big 12 Radio on the TuneIn Radio Network joining us a little bit later in the show to talk about the Badgers' new hire, Jeff Grimes. But will the Badgers be in the top 25 Badger basketball? Will they be in the top 25 again this year?
Again this year? Mm-hmm. Definitely not next week. I'm going to say yes. They will dip back into the top 20 to 25 range 2 more times in the rankings throughout the season, but I think they're going to hover in like 35 to 40.
Yeah, I don't see them getting back. I agree with you, the 35 to 40 hovering.
I think they're a team that's going to rattle off a couple wins here or there throughout the year, but they're going to drop a lot of games too. Like if they drop it to Butler, I would not be surprised either.
And some of it has to do with the high, like when you start low, you get high, then you fall off right away. I think that kind of the voters don't want to get burned. There's a personal, like if you're the voter side of things of like, all right, we overestimated you once. We're not going to do it again.
Yeah, they definitely got fooled once. Yeah,
so it's going to take them like a week or like an extra week to get into it, and that extra week could be the difference between like, they're maybe fringe top 25, then they lose a game that's kind of middling, and then they're like, we'll keep them back at like 30.
Yeah,
and then every time they're close, it's kind of like the Pro Bowl. You're in a year too late, and you're in it a year too long. That's kind of the idea with voting for it. I think the Badgers are going to be one of those now that they're not going to get the benefit of the doubt the rest of the year for the top 25.
Yeah, those George Bush voters on the AP panel definitely going to be, fool me once, can't get fooled again. Right, Jim?
Right.
That's how it goes.
Yes, great wordsmith. Him and Tarek Saleh right up there as far as the 2 best wordsmiths I've ever heard of. I don't know former President Bush, but I know Tarek Saleh. All right.
Amen.
So the Badgers hire Jeff Grimes as their offensive coordinator, and I would say I have a passing understanding of his offense just because I follow Kansas. Lance Leipold was the former head football coach at UW Whitewater, and ESPN Madison carried their games for a couple of years, and me and Gabe Neitzel got to do the play-by-play, not the play-by-play, the coaches show of those with Lance Leipold. Really nice guy. Followed him at Buffalo, followed him at Kansas. And I've at least kind of followed along what they've been doing. And Kansas finished strong. Now, they lost their last game of the year to Baylor, but they won 3 straight games against 3 ranked opponents. So they won 3 out of their last 4 games, and those 3 wins were over ranked opponents, which is a heck of a finish to a year that I think was disappointing overall. But the Badgers hired their offensive coordinator. And Kansas did have a dynamic quarterback, and honestly, their success was very much dependent on Daniels, their quarterback here. But I want to get to what Jeff Grimes means to the University of Wisconsin. And he's a 2-time finalist for the Frank Broyles Award. That's the nation's top assistant. I don't love the acronyms. I got burned on that before. Refers to his offense as the RVO, Reliable Violent Offense. I get it, but it seems a little gimmicky. But not gimmicky. In his 7 seasons as offensive coordinator, Grimes has averaged 171 rushing yards per game, 54th nationally, and he's been up there in points as well. He's had some high points as well. Baylor ranked 10th with 200 yards per game, and Kansas 13th with 211. I'll tell you right now, Ryan, I think all Badger fans would be thrilled, absolutely thrilled, at the opportunity to have a team averaging 200 yards rushing per game next season.
Honestly, you felt good when the team got 200 total yards in some of the games this season.
That is true.
I think
200 passing yards was a big lift.
200 passing yards was,
Yes.
I mean, that's guaranteed win basically for the Badgers at that point. But yeah, I think there are a couple times. I think the RVO offense, like I know the acronym is gimmicky. I think he said that once at Baylor like 3 years ago, and people just bring it up all the time.
Yep.
I don't think there's anything gimmicky about the way the offense runs, though.
Right.
I think it's something I get excited thinking about it as a Badgers fan because it just feels like a more aggressive version of what they used to do.
It's maybe, and there's a million reasons why maybe Paul Chryst got away from it. But when Paul had even Scott Tolzien here and obviously with Russell Wilson, the offense seemed to do more. It was the Graham Mertz, Jack Cohen, forgot the left, Alex Hornibrook, and that era of quarterback that it seemed that the Badgers reverted back to Barry Alvarez's style of offense and didn't do some of the simple motion things that Paul Chryst was known for, the fake end arounds, making life a little bit easier for some of his players, a simple passing game. And I do think that Wisconsin, finding that balance, you can't go back to 1998 or 99, but finding that balance of an offense that can be, I would say, explosive in the running game and respectable in the passing game. What's the efficient? I'll go with efficient. Be explosive in the running game, be efficient in the passing game. As long as you're getting an explosive play somewhere, then I feel good about what this offense can be.
I honestly think it might be more than it is efficient in the passing game. I think it's going to be explosives in the passing game. I think it's a lot of heavy running, setting up big passing plays, which is similar to what the Badgers used to do. But even then, the Badgers' offense, passing offense, was so conservative. This feels more like when you're going to drop back to throw it, they're dropping back to throw it.
So I guess when we mean efficient, I just mean when we are taking those chances, that it's going to hit more. Like the air raid was more of, we are going to take so many chances that we take 100 chances and 30 of them hit. That's a 30% hit rate. We'll be fine. Like that just obviously it's an exaggeration, but that seemed like the offense was more of like, we'll just always take shots. And this way, when you're mixing in the run, that we will be efficient in our shot taking. And then because of that, those shots will be made at a higher percentage. So that's the way. So we're on the same page there, that I do think there'll be explosive plays. I just think those explosive plays will be just they'll
be more effective,
strategic and manufactured in the idea that you are setting them up, that the play action can open someone up, and you can catch a little element of surprise. And I think that's the one thing that goes away with the air raid, and not just on it was pretty, I don't know, it seemed pretty obvious when the Badgers were going to run, and not just formationally, but just in the distance, down in distance as well. And the concern I have, or the thing I like about Grimes that I'm hopeful for in this offense is that let's keep it simple, but let's do a lot out of a set amount of formations. Instead of we're going to run one play out of this formation, one play out of this formation, one play out of this position, these player groupings and one play. I'd rather have less actual formations with more happening out of those formations than throwing out a bunch of formations. And I think that's what this offense will look like.
I think so, too. And more than anything, beyond what we think it might look like, we know that this is something that I think Luke Fickell's going to get behind.
Yes.
This is more of what his vision for what Wisconsin football was going to be from the start.
Yeah.
And that's what's more encouraging to me about it than anything, compared to what we have with Longo and trying to make the dairy raid happen.
Yes, let's never mention the dairy raid again. I will mention again that the jump around is outfitted by Iron Jock. Use the promo code ESPN30 for 30% off all purchases of $50 or more at ironjock.com. It's Iron Jock with a C. And let's hear from Barry Alvarez. He joined the Great Dane Huddle. Let's hear from Barry Alvarez talking about his excitement over the Badgers' new hire, Jeff Grimes.
Well, the two things fired me up, and you just said them. He's got a run game background, and he's got an O-line background. Those historically have been the strength of our program. We've won here, and we've put ourselves on the map in college football because of our run game and our offense, and led by our offensive line. So when I heard that, I was really excited. And that doesn't mean he has to run every snap, but a lot of the snaps he has to run. But no, I'm really excited about it. I don't know him personally. I read the resume. I like the numbers that he's put up where he's been.
And this is not for nothing. I mentioned it earlier. Jeff Grimes, offensive coordinator at Kansas, tied to Lance Leipold. Lance Leipold, if you were unaware, as I mentioned earlier, not only was he at UW-Whitewater, but he was a GA at the University of Wisconsin. He has some of that Barry Alvarez coaching tree in him. So it stands to reason that Jeff Grimes maybe has some of the sensibilities that if Lance Leipold, who has a Barry Alvarez branch or two attached to him, likes him, then I think that Grimes might work here at Wisconsin. We don't know the exact amount of pay coming in for Grimes, but he was set to make $1 million per year at Kansas. Longo was making 1.25. Heck, I don't even think that a $250,000 raise would not be enough. I think that could be enough for him. Maybe it's that 1.5, or I don't know if there's bonuses built into this too. Maybe there's an opportunity that, hey, you get the 1.25, and if the Badgers hit these sorts of goals, then you get more. The thing I want to get to next, I want to hear from Mark Tauscher, who obviously is part of the ESPN Wisconsin team, but he's also part of the Badgers team, and he talked a little bit he talked with Jeff Grimes. Let's hear that.
I guess the first question, what attracted you to come to Wisconsin?
I guess just the history, the tradition of this place, and it being a place that I think kind of fits me and what I've always believed in terms of football. Coach Fickell, who I didn't know prior to this time, made a strong appeal to who I am as a coach and what's going on here and the direction that the program is headed. And
so what was that first conversation like with Luke?
Interesting, because if you're in this business, of people often, even if you don't know them. We talked a little bit, and as we got to know each other a little bit, I think we both realized before long that it seemed like we aligned philosophically in terms of the game. But one thing I really appreciated, any conversation like that, there's the mandatory small talk up front, right? Hey, I don't know you, you know me, you know this guy, and then there was a brief pause. And then I thought, okay, he's about to go for it here. He's going to start digging into me as a coach and find out what I'm about. And instead, he said, "Tell me about your family." And yeah, my wife too. And oh yeah, me too with our kids. And so there was a personal touch there that I really appreciated.
So, look, everything's going to be good coming in. I do like Jeff Grimes sounds and looks like a Badgers offensive coordinator.
Isn't he incredible?
It looks like got giant hands. I feel like him and Tausch are shaking hands.
Yeah.
Like kind of shook the ground over at Camp
He
Randall.
looks like Sam Elliott's younger brother, almost.
Okay.
The actor.
Yeah. He's bigger than Sam as far as
the bigger younger brother. Though.
Gotcha. Yeah. But yeah, that one works. He honestly looks like he could be related to Tauscher.
All offensive linemen are related.
I mean, there could be some DNA crossover. Who knows? Get the 23andMe and we'll find out. But
does anything stick out to you there? Just relationship-wise, it seems like compared to what we heard from Phil Longo when he talked about his relationship with Luke Fickell, obviously at the beginning it was a lot better.
Yeah.
But from what we know towards the end, the philosophical differences, to me that clip just signals that that's not going to be the issue here. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work because the offense or maybe the players aren't good enough. But at least there's a true alignment and that things will be working in concert, like they were with the air raid.
And let's just take the everything's going to be okay side of things. Set aside the personal. I think the situation with Longo went sideways because things didn't work on the field. And then egos come in because then you're trying to hey, who's right, who's wrong because things aren't working. And then you're Luke Fickell, you're worried about your legacy. Phil Longo's worried about his legacy. And so a relationship in between those two that was not based on a lot before they were hired, except for they liked each other during the interview process, it can crack. And partially because Luke Fickell brought in someone. There was two mistakes I think Luke Fickell made with Phil Longo. He brought in an offensive style that did not necessarily jive with what Fickell wanted. So he was honestly trying to sell himself on the idea that the air raid would work. And maybe it was because of recruiting that he thought was important. Or maybe he thought the Big Ten needed to be the air raid offense to be successful. Or maybe he got caught up in the resume. That's not uncommon. This time around, Grimes philosophically seems like someone who aligns with Coach Fickell. So the other mistake was that Fickell didn't know Longo and like beforehand, like a long, strong connection with him. And this is the case here. But I do think Fickell and Grimes, and you move around enough in college football, you are going to be running into people or working with people you might not have a strong relationship with at first, and then you build it. And I think that's fine. And I think obviously the best coaches have a long tree of people that they can work with on interconnections and kind of build that up. Barry Alvarez talked about that. But I also think the fact that it seems like they're aligned in what they want to do should negate if things get tough, they don't have that sort of goodwill. But I also go back to if Tanner Mordecai and Tyler Van Dyke were healthy the last 2 seasons, Phil Longo and Luke Fickell are probably better friends, and they get along better.
Great point.
Yeah. I think the more success they have early on with Fickell and Grimes, the more that they can build those bonds naturally, and then there's not that confrontation of why is this failing.
How much success do you think they'll have with the Badgers' 2025 schedule?
I'm not going to get into wins and losses. Realistically, the bar is so low, as you have the schedule up here. I'm going to do wins and losses right now.
Come on.
All right. I said we're going to do it right now. I changed my mind. So I have it in front of me, and you can see it on the YouTube. Here's where I put these down as I'm going to give you the must-wins, and I'm going to give you the ones that they should have to win. You got to put that back up there for me. And then I'm going to give you the ones that I feel like they are going to lose, and then the 50-50 games. All right? So Miami and Middle Tennessee State at Camp Randall have to be – those are must-wins. At Bama, I'm going to call that a loss. Versus Maryland at Camp Randall, I'm going to call that a toss-up. It's not a must-win. It's a toss-up. At Michigan, I'm putting that down as a loss. Home Iowa, I have to put that down as a toss-up to be optimistic. Home Ohio State, I've marked it down as a loss. At Oregon, I mark it down as a loss. Home Washington, that's a toss-up. At Indiana, look, we don't know what Indiana's going to be. So I'm still going to put that down as a toss-up right now. Home Illinois, that has to be a must-win, but I'm going to put it down as a toss-up. And at Minnesota, a toss-up. So realistically, I got 2 wins on the schedule where I say the Badgers definitely are going to win. And that's the first 2 games of the year. The rest are toss-ups. I think
the Maryland game, you could say that they'll win that game.
Okay, so we'll give them 3.
Yeah. I'm really confident at 3.
I'm not afraid of the toss-up games. I'm afraid of Ohio State. I'm afraid of Alabama on that schedule. I'm not even afraid of Michigan necessarily, even though I marked it down as a loss. But those are the ones I'm definitely afraid of. Minnesota, I'm not afraid of.
No.
Washington. Iowa at home. Again, just give me a functional offense and see what goes back, see what happens. Going back to Longo and this team, I want the offense to look like it knows what it's doing. It doesn't look like someone just picked up the controllers and was learning a playbook while they're trying to play the game.
Yeah.
And so to make the NCAA college football reference. So that's what I want out of this team, is that for the offense to look functional, and then I think they're going to be in a lot more games.
Yeah.
If they finish with 6 wins next year, and they're bowl eligible again, that honestly is a step forward. And then 2, if they look like a team, let's say they're averaging 200 rushing yards a game, and then the passing game's just not clicking, we're going to feel good about it. Like, we're going to feel good about if you're putting out 200 rushing. If you're putting out 200 yards a game rushing, that probably puts you in the top 25 in rushing yards in college football. That's a good place for the Badgers to crawl back to. At this point, the Badgers are literally trying to learn to, I guess it's not literally, but metaphorically in football, they're trying to learn to crawl before they can walk and then run again offensively. And they have to do that quickly, and you can do that quickly in the portal. This show is brought to you in part by Ho Chunk Gaming Madison. Go be a winner and go to Ho Chunk Gaming Madison. The other changes that could be coming on the coaching staff for the Wisconsin Badgers, I don't think anything's going to change defensively. I was curious if, like, the right coach shook free, could they bring someone in to help I think at this point you're looking at a Jack Del Rio replacement is probably what you're looking at for the Badgers, bringing in a defensive mind that could be adjacent to the program, but not someone who is on the field every game that could be a resource for Tressel. But I honestly think the problem with the defense, looking at it, is I think, I'm not even saying the players that they had aren't talented. I'm saying they didn't recruit properly for winning games against Nebraska, Iowa, and Minnesota. And also understanding that at Wisconsin, you might not be able to get those 5-star guys. Like you want to go shop at Whole Foods or whatever the fancy boutique grocery store is and get the best of the best, the organic apples and bananas and everything, and that grass-fed beef. But sometimes you might just have to get the cows full of hormones and some of the stuff you don't want to eat because it's the cows you can afford.
Interesting metaphor.
Well, we're in Wisconsin.
We are.
Yeah.
I think you're right. Yeah, you got to make sure that base is still strong. You got to get the protein.
Yeah, once in a while mix in some grass-fed beef. Great.
Yeah, some nice little glaze, little panache.
Yeah, you mix it in. The organic vegetables, you mix those in. But right now, sometimes you just have to get the stuff from the good grocery store, not the boutique grocery store.
Just making sure we stay warm. We just don't want to go hungry right now.
You got to have a little Bajir in you.
Bajir, okay.
If you want to beat the Hakai. Players. And I know we have Ari Temkin of Big 12 Radio on TuneIn Radio coming up here in a minute, but I want to talk about the players. And quarterback, I don't know, TBD. So I made a little list of what I want the Badgers to add. And it's really about positions, Ryan, but I will throw some names. I pulled them off ESPN's top 50. I don't know if they have any ties to the Badgers or not. I just pulled some names that I found interesting off the ESPN top 50. And I'm going to run quickly through positional groups that I think the Badgers need to add on. Getting back Trech Kekahuna is important, though. That, to me, forget even the player, which is important. He came back after Grimes arrived, and there's no world that Jeff Grimes did not have a conversation with Trech, and that Trech had that conversation and said, I want to come back. Clearly, there's money involved, I'm sure, but these kids aren't all about the money. They want to. You have to assume most of these kids want to go play pro, so they want the opportunity to showcase their skills and be great, and then get paid. So I'm going to go through the positions of need I thought for the Badgers because I know we got Ari coming up here in a minute. So I went with a little different here. I'm going to start a quarterback, Ryan, and the name I wrote down because I'm trying to think about gettable, and I don't know how attractive this quarterback position is at Wisconsin. I don't know what Wisconsin can pay for. I'm going back to the well. The guy who replaced Tanner Mordecai at SMU, Preston Stone. He's a redshirt junior because here's the other part of it. You have Mabry Matoyer. You have Carter Smith, who decommitted from Michigan because he didn't want to compete in the same class with one of the top quarterbacks in the country, and I don't blame him for that. So I think you could end up running the risk of alienating some of your younger quarterbacks. There were some other QBs on this list that had more time available on their football clock. I didn't want to bring in someone that could alienate those guys. Preston Stone, 3,197 yards passing, 32 total touchdowns in 2023. They won 11 games. He broke his leg at the end of that season for SMU. Came back this year, tried to play. He got benched. SMU had a heck of a season, having a heck of a season, but he's on that roster. He's in the portal. I think he's a player. You win 11 games in the season, I'm in on you, okay? That's my quarterback. You hate it? Love it? You fine with it?
I'm good with it.
All right.
I think it's exactly what they need, like you said, bridge quarterback.
And so I'm going to go, because the other one is from two players from the same team. So other one was running back. I'm going to go with Ahmad Hardy, a running back from UL Monroe. He's a freshman. He was Sunbelt Freshman of the Year. But that way you have Dupree, you have Dylan Jones, you have Acker around, but then you have a guy in Hardy who can be in this group and be a proven running back. I don't know if we need to. Tui Walker, there's a million different running backs on this list. I decided to go with, how about we look from a level up? And Mark Tosher talked about that with us, Ryan. Trying to find a player looking to level up. You level up to the Big Ten. Maybe he's not super expensive, but he was 14 on ESPN's top 50.
True. I do think he will be an expensive one. I think I saw he had visits with Texas and Alabama.
Okay, so I got good taste.
Yes, you do.
I got good taste.
5-star taste.
Dylan Thieneman, a safety from Purdue.
Yes.
Badgers need a safety.
They sure do.
Yes, they desperately need a safety. Purdue's leading tackler last year. And then I went with another player from Purdue, Will Helt, defensive end from Purdue. The thought on him was he's more of a polished, finished product, but the finished product's pretty good. And the Badgers need some, for lack of a better word, professionals. Like someone just come in and go, I know how to play football. I know how to be a Simon Strong, and I know how to help this team win, and I've competed in the Big Ten. So those are the guys that I have. Well, what, you feel good at that?
I feel very good about that. I think you make a great point, especially about health. They need guys who can come in and contribute immediately.
Yes.
Now, those guys are expensive, and they're hard to find. They might have to get them from the MAC more than some of the bottom-tier Big Ten schools.
Yeah.
But that philosophy is exactly what they need. And the positions you mentioned, probably the ones they need the most, too.
Yeah.
A cornerback or two would be nice.
Yeah. I leaned on the Big Ten because I thought maybe they'd want to stay in the Big Ten, some of those kids.
Fingers
You're at
crossed.
Purdue, and you got your butt kicked by Wisconsin. One of the few teams Wisconsin could handily beat.
Hey.
So now you can go
Blacktober,
join,
baby.
You can go join the winners there. Go to Simden Chevy in Mount Horeb if you're in the market for a new or new to you Chevy Silverado or Colorado at Simden Chevy in Mount Horeb. And before we get to Ari, we'll get to him in a minute here, but Badger Volleyball, they had a big-time recruit come through, a transfer in from Ohio State, but then also they have they play number 60 Texas A&M, and that is on ESPN Madison. That'll start at 5:30. The coverage will tomorrow, 6 o'clock. What is it tip-off? What is it?
First serve.
First serve, 6 o'clock here on ESPN Madison. The Badgers swept the Aggies 3-0 at the Fieldhouse in September, so we're proud to be the home of them, and that'll be coming up tomorrow on ESPN Madison. We'll get to Ari Temkin of Big 12 Radio on TuneIn Radio coming up next.
Staying on top of our game is one of the hardest things to do. At Game Day Men's Health, we specialize in testosterone replacement therapy, weight loss, erectile dysfunction, and wellness. Proven to increase energy, build muscle, improve mood, and boost sex drive. Get started now and book your free consultation and testing. You'll get test results back in minutes, and we'll create a plan to optimize your health. Game Day Men's Health. Book your free consultation today.
Well, we all can have thoughts on what Jeff Grimes will be as the Badgers offensive coordinator and what the RVO offense, reliable, violent offense, will be, but I thought we'd bring in a Good Karma teammate and member of the Big 12 Radio, TuneIn Radio Network there. Ari Temkin is joining us, and Jeff Grimes has a background at Baylor and at Kansas, and I believe, I don't know, it's conference free alignment. At some point they were in the Big 12, Ari. So, Ari, thanks so much for hopping on it and talking with us today.
Yeah, and I'm an alum of the University of Kansas as well, so definitely the right person to be telling you about Jeff Grimes.
Even better, because I am a fan of Kansas, and I saw them play some because, and I mentioned this earlier to our listeners, Lance Leipold was the head coach at UW Whitewater, and Gabe Neitzel of ESPN Milwaukee and I actually hosted a coach's show with Lance when he was at Whitewater. I've stayed connected with him when he went to Buffalo, and I still message with him at Kansas. I'm always rooting for Kansas to do well. And, Jalen Daniel, one of the quarterback out there, obviously injured on and off, but someone who's been fun to watch when I've been able to watch those Kansas games. But tell us about the experience with Jeff Grimes at OC and maybe what the Badger fans will look to expect here at Wisconsin.
Yeah, and I appreciate you having me on, Jim. I mean, look, number one, Jeff Grimes is such a better cultural fit at UW than Phil Longo was. I mean, this is just this is a meat and potatoes program and always has been. And you just don't want, like, an air raid offense to me is not the right fit. Culturally, Grimes is a former offensive lineman. He's a former offensive line coach. His offense is based off the wide zone. So again, it's predicated on running schemes. So, just from a Longo versus Grimes standpoint, it's just such a better fit. Now, from Grimes' standpoint as being Kansas's OC last year, he was in a tough spot. The Jayhawks had so much success under longtime offensive coordinator Andy Kotelnicki. They won 9 games the year before Kotelnicki left and went to Penn State. And so Grimes comes into a situation where, he's trying to implement his wide zone offense in conjunction with what Kansas had been running, because Kansas brought back basically everybody from that 9-4 team that beat Arkansas in the Liberty Bowl the year before. And they didn't want to change the calls. They didn't want to change the verbiage. So they wanted Grimes to adjust to them. And so I thought, he was really put into a really tough situation. Now, ultimately, Kansas's record at 5-7 is more of a reflection on turnovers than anything else. Jalen Daniels, who you alluded to, early in the season, as he missed basically the entire season last year due to injury, he was very, very shaky and turned the ball over in really bad times. So it's funny because initially a lot of Kansas fans were upset about Grimes. And when you're watching the games, you're like, Grimes has nothing to do with this. It's just a bad interception by Jalen Daniels, just a really bad turnover. And that was the issue with Kansas to where they had to get to a situation where they won 3 straight down the stretch, handing BYU their first loss of the year, Iowa State their second, and then beating a top 25 Colorado team. They just lost to Baylor the final game of the regular season to not get to bowl eligibility. But the one thing with Grimes I'll say from last year is there probably were times where he didn't run the ball enough. I mean, Kansas, despite being 5-7, was one of the best running teams in college football. And so, I think that's certainly by design, but that's how they had been even under Andy Kotelnicki. They've got a guy who's going to, I think, be a really good NFL running back in Devin Neal. They were a really good rush offense that I think predates Jeff Grimes. And there were times probably last year where Grimes didn't, down the stretch where they're running the ball at 5-6 yards a carry. They're throwing the ball with a lead. There was a game, I can't remember which game it was, but they're throwing the ball with a lead in the fourth quarter, and it's like you're running at 6 yards a carry. It made no sense. And I'm not the type of guy that likes to second guess play calling on a down in and out basis, because I think it's a fool's errand. Anybody could sit there, hindsight's 20/20, and second guess any decision made over the course of a game. I like just the overall game plan, and I think ultimately Grimes kind of over the course of the season, this offense improved, as it got a better handle on the way Grimes wanted to call games. But you look back, whether it was at BYU, Baylor, or Kansas, and you are not going to find very many teams that he ran that did not have a really elite rushing offense. And there's 2 that stand out. The 2020 BYU Cougars, who, I'm sure a lot remember that was Zach Wilson's final year where BYU was undefeated for the majority of the year, where he was up for the Broyles Award, Grimes was, and then 2021 Baylor that won the Big 12 championship and, was another prolific rushing attack. So, ultimately he's the perfect fit, I think, for Wisconsin and what they want to do.
So I want to kind of circle back on the passing side of things, because Badger fans were, I think, initially excited at the idea of Phil Longo coming in because, for whatever reason, Paul Chryst, his offense the last few years at Wisconsin, had devolved into almost what Barry Alvarez ran in the late 90s, early 2000s. And Paul, when he had Scott Tolzien and Russell Wilson here, seemed to do some more end-arounds, was more explosive. And obviously Russell Wilson is a borderline climbing towards Hall of Fame QB in the NFL. Scott Tolzien was a heck of a college quarterback, so both those guys made life easier for him. But I do think Wisconsin doesn't want to go back to 4 yards in a cloud of dust, and I do see that at Baylor he threw a lot of deep passes, and at Kansas, Daniel's 24% of his passes were at least 20 yards in the air down the field. So before we get more into the running game, talk about the explosiveness through the air, because I think Badger fans are very terrified of we're just going to kind of bleed out a game like we were towards the end of the Paul Chryst era.
Yeah, and Tolzien, by the way, Jim, a legendary Bears quarterback as well.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yes.
And that's a great point. And it's an important distinction here. We're talking about a wide zone running attack, right? So a lot of what we've traditionally seen with Wisconsin is that inside zone, which is, I'm not a football coach, as I'm sure you're well aware, but you're talking about horizontal movement along the offensive line versus vertical movement. What we've known for the Ron Dane Wisconsin Badgers offense was vertical movement. You are moving the guy in front of you off the ball. Wide zone wants to get to the edge, and so what you're going to see at its best is the offensive line move horizontally, so everybody's kind of going towards the wide side of the field to try to open some stuff up, and that is the base of the offense, but off of that, there's a ton of screen game and a lot of play action. And that's, I think, what's the major distinction there. It is a blend of sort of the old guard principles of, being a rush downhill football team, but using that to keep the defense on its toes. We think a lot about the air raid as being a zone read where the quarterback has to read the edge. What is the defensive end going to do at the end of the line of scrimmage? And based on that, if he's crashing down, you're going to throw the football, and then vice versa, run the football. So there's similar dynamics to this wide zone as well. And that it's on the running back to read the defense, to read the edge. So instead of the quarterback in the wide zone where everybody pushes horizontally, now it's on the running back to see, okay, what's the defensive end doing? Do I stretch this to try to get out wide? Or am I finding a hole and a gap here in between because of where the defensive end has taken it? If the defensive end wants to try to cheat inside, now I'm taking it to the outside because I've got more protection to the outside to get to the edge. But if the defensive end takes the edge, now I can kind of cheat it in a little bit inside. And again, this is all, it's an oversimplification of a thing that's not every down we're going to see that. You're going to see some inside zone, I'm sure, with Jeff Grimes. You're going to see some duo. You're going to see a lot of different stuff. The thing that I was most impressed about Grimes this past year And again, you look at a team that went 5-7, and you're probably thinking, why would they hire a offensive coordinator from Kansas that went 5-7? It was the blending of what Kotelnicki had done with Jeff Grimes' true principles of being that wide zone offense. And so a lot of that is the window dressing. Kotelnicki, to me, was a genius and still is at Penn State with the pre-snap motion, the window dressing, getting guys, really creating a lot of different diversions with the offense. And the Kansas offense did a ton of that this year, which, previously under Baylor or BYU, you didn't see as much with the Jeff Grimes offense. Now, some of that could be the carryover that Kansas wanted to keep it, close to what they had seen before. But the hope, I would think, if you're Wisconsin, is you're kind of mixing from a lot of the different, areas in which you were borrowing from. In today's football, offensively, you have to have some of that pre-snap motion. You really need to, create diversions on offense to keep the defense on their toes. So, yeah, the wide zone offense, a huge difference between that, traditional inside zone where you've got hat on hat, getting vertical blocking. It's more horizontal blocking, get to the edge, and then the running back's going to read what the edge is doing in order to see, do I cut it back inside and find a hole there or take it to the outside?
On the personnel and recruiting side of things, Wisconsin had kind of recruited for the air raid, and good players are good players. So I do think that will kind of overlap there. But what type, at the key positions for this offense, O-line and tight end, running back, wide receiver, what types of players fit this offense the best?
Yeah, those traditional Wisconsin offensive linemen, right? I mean, you want guys that can maul and athletic guys, right? Because this is not one-on-one get downhill vertical blocking. It's that horizontal blocking. So better for good athletes. I think the tight end position is hugely important in this offense because, as you move the line of scrimmage and you are blocking horizontally, now you can run the tight end across the formation and kind of get him lost in the shuffle. So, running back, tight end, offensive line, three most important components of the wide zone offense. The tight end probably the most underrated, again, because you can do so many different things with the tight end when the line is moving the direction that it's moving. Because the defensive end on the tight end side or whoever you have matching up, if it's a linebacker or whatever it is matching up with that tight end side, you've got to force him into make a decision. So I would say most important in this offense would be tight end, just in terms of all the different ways in which you can get creative with what you're doing with the tight end as you're blocking down.
I mean, Wisconsin, whether it's Travis Beckham or they've had a long list of tight ends go to the NFL and have nice careers, and kind of Lance Kendricks. There's been a lot of good college tight ends here at Wisconsin, and some have gone to the NFL and had some success as well. So that's, I think, encouraging. What about Grimes as a recruiter? I guess we got his first glimpse into it because before Grimes got here about 3 or 4 days ago, Trech Kekahuna, one of their up-and-coming wide receivers, said he was going to go into the portal. I think it was yesterday, late last night, he said he's going to come back. Clearly money is going to be a part of that, but a conversation with Grimes, I'm sure, happened. So a little bit of an inkling that Grimes is at least someone that can get players motivated to be excited about this offense by bringing back someone like Trech. But what is the overall vibe on Grimes as far as a recruiter?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. He's got a kid that transferred from Baylor to Kansas that played last year, didn't play much. But I don't know if he's out of eligibility, one of his sons. That's a great question, Jim. And it's tough to tell because, 1 year at Kansas and obviously you're just not going to have a boost in terms of recruiting for the 1 year. And then just 3 years at Baylor where they good in 2021. So he in back-to-back years at BYU and then Baylor, he was a Broyles Award winning finalist. And so at that point, he had to have the chops to help in recruiting. But I think things went south for Dave Aranda into year 2 and 3, 2022 and 2023, to where they went 3-9 in 2023. And he really started this season, Aranda did, on the hot seat. So they do depart with Grimes. They went to the air raid, bringing in Jake Spavital. So it's tough to tell because they kind of had different personnel to run the offense that worked really, really well Aranda's first year. And then if they did recruit well after that, it kind of came into an offense that didn't make a ton of sense in terms of the mix between that wide zone versus the air raid offense. But look, I take 2023. Just look at the rushing numbers of the teams that Jeff Grimes has called offensive plays for. 2023 is the outlier to me. His minimum, his worst years, you're talking about 4 yards to 4.5 yards a carry. In his best years, you're talking about 5.5 to 6 yards a carry. So, anywhere between 4.5 to 6 yards a carry. This is a really good offense for a running back in it because the running back is forced to have to make decisions, and running backs, as opposed to, one cut and go, that's the avenue I need to pursue. This gives, a little bit more flexibility to a running back to know, all right, do I want to keep this going to the edge, cut it outside, or, is this one that I can cut it back inside? So I think, this is going to be an offense that's attractive to the running back. I think because of the play action stuff, you are going to get some wide receivers that are very attracted to it. Like a lot of this is run, play action, deep ball. Like that's really what this offense is. It is very run heavy that is going to take shots down the field.
Well, as Wisconsin calls itself and has earned a title running back I think Badger fans will be excited about that. They also remember the name Dave Aranda. Maybe they had a conversation about what life is like in Madison between Grimes and Aranda at some point. The quarterback position, for those fans in Wisconsin who haven't seen Daniels play, describe his style, and is that the type of quarterback you think that Grimes is going to want in his offense?
That's a great question. No, because of how many turnovers he had.
Right.
I mean, again, I think Kansas, the reason they went 5-7, if I'm going to be overly simplistic about it, was because of Jalen Daniels and the turnovers. And when they played really well, Kansas became the first team in the history of college football to be under 500 and win 3 straight games against top 25 opponents. And that was because Jalen Daniels stopped turning the ball over and was completing passes at a higher level. So I think what you need is a quarterback. Do you need a mobile quarterback? No, it doesn't hurt. Jalen Daniels is certainly a mobile quarterback, and that is obviously going to make your running game so much more difficult to address and account for. But you need a quarterback that's accurate down the field because, again, this offense is built on, again, the tight end kind of sneaking out and finding his spots. But more than anything, it is about taking those shots, and so you need a quarterback that can get the ball down the field. That's why you mentioned the air yards thing. Like that's a huge metric when it comes to a Jeff Grimes run offense. It's a little bit different to judge last year's Kansas offense based on what we're going to see with Jeff Grimes under Luke Fickell because this is going to be his offense. Whereas last year he was sort of driving the bus of an offense that was partially his. We saw some of these wide zone principles, but ultimately Lance Leipold told him, we want to use the same terminology. We don't want to change around a ton. Just kind of pick up what we're doing because we had so many players that had already been here and that were accustomed to playing with one another. So. For me, the most important is an accurate quarterback more than anything else. Again, it helps to have a dual threat when you're running the type of wide zone offense they want to run, but it's not a zone read offense. It doesn't need to be. Zach Wilson, when he was running it at BYU, it was because of Tyler Algier. It wasn't because of Zach Wilson's mobility. It was Tyler Algier, and now we're hitting teams over the top with deep shots. I mean, look at Baylor too. When they won the Big 12. I mean, they weren't going to wow you with Gary Bohannon at times that year when they won the Big 12 at quarterback. Not the most prolific quarterback. He was more of a dual threat guy, but they changed quarterbacks that year. And so it was like mobile, dual threat, but really it's about accuracy down the field when you get those shots, and then it's about having a good running back.
And then the last question I have for you is, I guess, a simple one. Was it just not a fit? Like, why do you think Grimes was available / wanted to get out of Kansas to come to Wisconsin? It does seem like it's a little bit of one of those hires that maybe didn't fit all the way, but what's your insight into that?
Yeah, I think that's it, Jim. I think it just didn't totally fit. And again, it's not his fault. I mean, it's so tough to ask a guy that has pretty good chops as a coordinator, hey, we know you've been very successful running the offense that you run. We'd like you to kind of mold it to be a little bit more about what we do. There are very few examples of that working out. Now, in some ways, it did. And Kansas, at a point in the season, looked really, really good. They just, again, turnover issues plagued them in the Baylor game and then in the first stretch of this season. But I do think from a Kansas fan's perspective, there were a lot of fans that felt like a lot of this is on Grimes. I don't. There certainly were some games where they probably could have run the ball a little bit more at the end. But if they don't turn the ball over and have the turnover issues that Jalen Daniels had, it's a totally different scenario for them. So I think it was, a perfect situation, quite frankly, for Jeff Grimes, with the offensive line pedigree that he has, history that he has, being an offensive lineman in college at UTEP, coaching offensive linemen, and then having this wide zone offense. Like, what better place to be than at UW? So I think he found the right fit. Because what's weird is, I think there was a lot of talk internally, like both Kansas moved on from both coordinators, but both kind of moved on from them. And so you're wondering, all right, what was it? Were they let go? Was it a mutual parting of ways? And look, Kansas is newer offensive coordinator is the old guy, which is Jim Zebrowski, who has been on staff with Leipold forever.
Yep.
Why did they elevate him to offensive coordinator? Why did they bring in Jeff Grimes last year? Was it to help Zebrowski maybe? I'm not sure. And I kind of feel like Kansas's offense could take a step backwards next year, not just because of the personnel they're losing, but I mean, again, if Leipold is passing over his guy and Zebrowski to hire an outside guy and say, run the offense we've been running under a different guy, that's a red flag for the guy that they've now elevated to be the offensive coordinator. So, look, I think very highly of Jeff Grimes. I really think this is the perfect fit. This is not the, run downhill, first down, second down type of offense that we've seen previously at UW. This is a different rushing style that I think will blend perfectly with new age and old age. So to me, it was probably more about the right fit for Grimes. And again, I don't know exactly what happened behind the scenes with Leipold, but both offensive and defensive coordinators stepped away. In the case of Brian Borland, their defensive coordinator, he retired, but Kansas's defense had a bad year as well. So a lot of Kansas fans and media thought they were going to move on from him anyways. So probably a mutual parting of ways, but an opportunity opened up with Luke Fickell that I think Grimes knew he couldn't pass up.
Honestly, reminds me a little bit of, and maybe this moved on faster, of Phil Longo's still a good coach. He just didn't fit Wisconsin. And I think Luke Fickell might have gotten caught up in the idea of this name coach is available. They could help with recruiting. They could help with these certain things. I'm just going to bring in the name without the personal relationship or maybe even the ties that fit his sensibilities as a head coach. And maybe with Grimes, it was just a matter of this guy is a proven track record coach. Let's bring him to Kansas. And smartly for Kansas, moving on a year early because you sit too long, and obviously we saw what happened this year with the Badgers that Longo got let go during the year. So sometimes things just don't fit. Longo's still a good coach, and I think Grimes is as well.
Yeah, and I think to your point, like I'm sure a lot of UW fans were excited about the opportunity to maybe be more of a pass-oriented offense. And it's like you just can't, maybe you can evolve and change the way you're running the football, but there's just no way that Wisconsin should be running that kind of an offense. The air raid was invented because, Hal Mumme initially, but even Mike Leach at Texas Tech, just didn't have the athletes and the personnel to run, a traditional offense. So when you don't have big, burly offensive linemen, you want them in more pass sets. You want them backing up. When you have the big, Wisconsin offensive linemen that we've seen come through here over the last how many ever decades,
yep.
You don't want them running back. You want them pushing forward because they can knock you off the ball. So air raid at its core, and look, it's been bent and changed, but principally air raid is for a team like Kansas, is for a team like Texas Tech that doesn't have the assets that you're going to get at UW, or you're going to get at Ohio State, or you're going to get at a Georgia, which is what we had seen for Wisconsin for a long time. So I think air raid doesn't really fit just, from a play on, play off basis, it might, but not as a principled offensive philosophy. I'm really excited to see what this wide zone brings to the table in Madison.
Ari, great insight. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for asking, buddy. Take care. Be well.
All right. Yeah, you too. That's Ari Temkin of Big 12 Radio on TuneIn Radio. Also a Good Karma Brands teammate. You missed any of that, you can listen back. Wisconsin on Demand, Apple, Spotify, any of those great places. We're also, obviously, this show will be posted up on YouTube. Ryan, I know normally I kind of get out quickly there, but more excited, less excited? Do you like my Phil Longo, Jeff Grimes comp? Because I do think that was a question that needed to be asked about why is Grimes not staying at Kansas?
It's a great question.
I love the answer.
Yeah. Sometimes it just doesn't work out. And look, I'm a little more pessimistic about the air raid offense, and I think Ari pointed out some of the main reasons for it, why I didn't think maybe from the start it wasn't a great idea.
Yep.
And I just think the idea that what Grimes does just has alignment with what the Badgers should be and what Luke Fickell wants, that just makes me feel so much better that it's at least going to be stable. So, and everything Ari said made me feel like this is going to be an offense that's very functional at Wisconsin and could really, could be what they were and even better in the past. Yeah, at this point, I'm gonna have my reserves up,
yes,
and I'm gonna have my walls up. I'm not gonna let myself get hurt again as a fan, but I definitely feel better after hearing more of what Ari said. It's really interesting to see what this offense can do.
My concern is that there was a couple things with the air raid at Wisconsin. I'm not one of those who said fundamentally it couldn't work here, but Phil Longo, when he got here, didn't seem willing to. What I thought he was going to do based off his reputation was modify the air raid. I mean, we used the term the dairy. What was it? The dairy raid.
Dairy raid is what it was affectionately called, and
yes.
that's the monster that they made.
Yeah, but I thought that would actually mean something where you're trying to blend how Wisconsin's bread is buttered in recruiting with the air raid, and because good offenses have touches of everything, and that's what I thought was going to happen. That didn't happen here. So not only the air raid, schematically they had to recruit for it and didn't recruit right for it. They didn't take advantage of the players they had for it. But then also the play calling seemed disjointed, and the quarterback was the other part of it. So there was multiple things that were wrong. I feel like, I guess I'll ask this to you as well. I am optimistic that the O-line has been recruited enough, and Joe Thomas even said that like this O-line can, even in the air raid, can still develop pros. And I think these players, especially with the offseason conditioning ready to go, can get back and have a lot of them are still recruited in the mindset of let's go knock someone over. And I think that's the natural inclination of offensive linemen, even if it is a glancing blow instead of the head-on blow. That's not concerning to me. If you're going forward, I think that's the step that you want out of this, and that's what I took away from Ari in this conversation. The offensive linemen in this offense are going to come forward, hit at an angle as opposed to the old school line them straight up. But hitting at an angle is a very common NFL theme. That gets you that ability to give the running back find the hole.
Forward momentum is forward momentum.
Yes, exactly. So they're going forward. So I like that. I think the offensive line will be good with that. Running backs are running backs.
Mm-hmm.
Dupree and Jones, I don't mean like I think they're very talented. And I think if you add another back to this mix, you're going to have some guys who will be able to run no matter what.
And it's more about making sure they know how to be the patient runners who've set up well with that zone, like you're saying.
The wide receivers, again, not they're wide receivers are wide receivers, but Pauling, Vinny Anthony, and Trech are, to me, three very good wide receivers.
Good pass catchers. I think in this offense, it'll be a little more dependent on finding guys who can also block out on the edge. I mean, like you said, they're going side to side. Those wide receivers are going to have a big role in making sure that they get blocked on that second level.
Absolutely.
And that's where the tight ends will come in big, too.
Yes. So I do think they have fine tight ends, and so maybe it's this cycle in the portal. Or maybe you try to find but I would love for them to be able to use the tight ends more.
Yeah, I'm one of their major actual recruiting targets right now in the transfer portal. His name is Tanner Koizal. He is one of the top tight ends in the country last year, had 94 catches, 839 yards, 8 touchdowns, 1 year of eligibility, and he's set to visit the Badgers tomorrow. So that's from Pete Thamel, reported that yesterday.
Well, someone send that clip about the tight ends being important in this offense.
Send that to his. I'll DM him.
Yeah.
I'll make sure he hears it.
So it took me a minute. I was trying to remember some of the names here. Jake Ferguson is a more recent one. Travis Beckham is another one. Troy Fumagalli.
Yeah.
Garrett Graham was a name I was trying to come up. Owen Daniels is another one. Lance Kendricks, Jacob Pedersen. They were some very good tight ends here.
And one of the things about Grimes, I believe at Kansas and at Baylor, he was listed as the tight ends coach, too. So he's not a quarterback coach. He's not a quarterback whisperer the way that Longo is or has been in the past. But tight end could be the position he really emphasizes in this offense. And that's the position, I mean, that kind of makes me think like 49ers type stuff, like old West Coast, getting those guys out in space and running people over.
It's a modified Paul Christ.
Yeah.
Because it's tight ends, O-line, and running backs for the most important positions on it. Still need that quarterback.
Yeah, always. No matter the offense.
Yes, but you still need that quarterback. But my point is, I don't think they have to do a lot in the portal as far as recruiting players that fit this offense. I think they have enough players that fit this offense. I think you could use another running back, a tight end, and a quarterback.
Yeah.
The O-line, you got the bodies, literally in the amount of bodies and the style that you need. So I don't think the portal for the O-line is necessary. I don't think the portal is necessary for a wide receiver, especially if you're not going to see a lot of 4 wide receiver sets. I understand the body type, but maybe you could fix that in actual high school recruiting too.
True. Yeah, that's what you hope for, yes.
And then you have the tight end. Yeah, maybe you get someone that can come in and play in this offense immediately. But quarterback, number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then you could use one more running back, and a tight end. So not a ton on the offense.
I think in the transfer portal this offseason, similar to last year, it's going to be more about replenishing the defense
Yes.
for this team.
I
think
agree.
the offense could get there quickly if everything hits the ground running with Grimes.
And that's what I was
knock
getting at.
on wood.
Yes.
But I think defense, no matter what, they need to replenish a lot of reserves.
Yes, and that's what I was getting for this offense. Why I'm optimistic is that these players on the roster, I think, fit close enough that you don't have to do some overhaul of the players that you have. The players that you have can fit. Maybe not every single one of them fits perfectly, but the large majority of them do. And a good offensive coordinator will figure out how to use Pauling and Kekahuna, because those are the two that, like, I don't know if they work. Vinny's a bigger guy, like at least
bigger
compared to
guy,
those
for
two.
sure. 6'1", yeah.
And so that's a good size for a wide receiver. And so he's someone I think can handle the blocking. And sometimes it's just about being a willing blocker.
Yeah.
I mean, Trech is a smaller guy, but if you're just willing to get out there and get in the way, that can help.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if we see a lot of 2 tight end sets.
Yes.
Especially because they have guys who are young, up and coming, didn't see the field a ton in the Dairy Raid, and were probably too inexperienced to see the field at all. This could be their year.
Absolutely. And Trech seems strong, too, so I think he can block. All right, so there's some reason to be optimistic. Again, the Badgers next year, my early bar setting is bowl eligibility and an offense. Here, I'm going to give you a number for it, an offense that gets 200 yards per game on the ground. Those are my 2 expectations after talking with Ari Temkin for next year. 6 wins and an offense that gets you 200 yards per game on the ground. This has been the Jump Around 3.0.